LinkedIn's first Chief HR Officer, Steve Cadigan, is a pioneering voice in the future of work, who splits his time between California and advising organizations across the globe, including the city of Lisbon, where I live. In today's conversation, Steve challenges the conventional wisdom around AI implementation, arguing we're falling into the same trap we've always had with technology, focusing on doing more, faster, and cheaper, when we should be reimagining how we create value entirely. So let's dive in to discover why AI represents only about 5% performance optimization and 95% opportunity for fundamental transformation.
Welcome to Self-Leadership to Potentialize with Andrew Bryant. We'll explore the power of potential and the promise of self-leadership. Join Andrew, a global leadership expert and author, as he shares insights, strategies, and stories spanning 25 years and 40 countries. Together, we'll unlock what makes us human, harness technology wisely, and step boldly into the future of leadership.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. We finally get to meet.
Yes, we do.
So what do we talk about? You're a future of work guy, right? So what does that mean? I mean, because it's a term that's been used for a while. If I was to play devil's advocate, I would say we're already in the future of work.
Yeah, or you could say, oh, why don't we talk about something bigger, which is the future of living? Which someone approached me with one time, like that, it's all together now. There is no, work in life. It's all about living. So yeah. And it's here for sure. I think the term is useful when trying to frame the context of the models of work that we've been using for decades just were not built for the radical amount of change and unpredictability that we confront today. And so I think it's just sort of, hey, we're declaring that, or at least I am, that the architecture of work was not built for this, and that we need to build a new architecture of work. And so that's sort of where I'm landing right now is let's have an honest conversation that most of you are playing defense of an old model, not offense in a new model, which means experimentation, right?
Sure. And I love that term experimentation because we all went through 2.5-3 year experiment and discovered new ways of working that people said would not work. And yet we did it, right? With the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, work at home, hybrid work was a reality. And yet, as you say, the architecture, people wanted to return to the architecture. Many of my clients, and there are many case studies of saying, you've got to come back to work. You've got to come back to the office. And it ignored many of the breakthroughs in diversity, equity, flexibility, work-life balance that actually were achieved through that. Would you like to comment on your observation about how people didn't really learn?
I think what we are seeing is just a reversion to what's comfortable. I know when we're together that we can produce XYZ outcome. I don't know long-term, if we're not together like we used to be, what the implications are for teamwork, what the implications are for our culture, because we've not delivered as an organization traditionally in that kind of capacity. So I want to control the variables. I want a predictable outcome. So that's why I think we're seeing a lot of people say, yeah, that was then, this is now, this is who we are. And I think, so I understand it. I'm not trying to take sides here because I'm helping both sides try to say, hey, you need to understand the other person's perspective. So why are they here? Like I had several Fortune 50 companies, middle management hire me to help them to build an argument with the senior management of why they shouldn't have to go back to the office, which was an interesting. Yeah. And we started with, well, look at it from their perspective. Stop with the simple, oh, it's, this real estate nut that they've, it's a, the opportunity loss of a real estate. That's not, I don't think what it's about. I think it's like, hey, I know our culture, our teamwork, our, organization can perform when we're together. And I don't know that it can when we're not. And so that was sort of, I think is why we're seeing this. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. If that's a path you want to take, that's your right to take it. I think you deserve to provide your employees with an explanation of why. instead of because I said, right? And then no, you are going to diminish the opportunity to recruit, attract a fair portion of the workforce who is telling every recruiter I talk to today, what's the first question candidates ask you? And they say, can I do the job remotely? And so, we're making the sausage right now. We don't have a lot of companies that were in person that went fully remote or hybrid. And by the way, hybrid has about 1,000 different iterations of what it could look like. So there's no like hybrid to classify. That's like going to the restaurant and the waiter asks you, what would you like? And you say, I'd like some food, like, well, hot food, cold food, and so I think, there's just so much that we're learning right now. And there's a few companies I've talked to who were remote from the start. And they're not companies that I would want to benchmark with if I was in person and I'm going remote, because they built everything from the start remotely.
Yeah.
And you had something together and now you're going apart. That's a completely different challenge that you have.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was a case study I put in my 2021 book, the New Leadership Playbook. And it's the company, the blogging platform that's, what's it start with? The W.
Medium?
The company.
Medium?
Pardon?
Medium? That one?
No, not Medium. Everybody had the free blog. Anyway, it began with W, but I can't remember. I'll fill in the blank at some point. And that whole company started remotely. And I mean, they said they had to buy offices because they had to have somewhere to have, to meet clients. Clients didn't want to always meet in Starbucks, right? So they had to have some offices. And its whole culture was remote, and hiring people on a project before you hired them for a full job to see if they would actually fit in with the culture. So there were examples of that. And this word culture, many of the organizations that I've worked with, particularly as we're coming out of the pandemic, were saying, yeah, well, we kind of like the remote, but we did feel, how do we know that they are in our culture? How do they, they're one of us if we can't see them and feel them and touch them and have a coffee with them? And so that was a big question that nobody really answered. How do we create a culture when people are sitting geographically differently, influenced by their own nuanced local culture? Have you seen anybody address the culture problem remotely?
I've seen
the culture. Maybe I should call it the culture opportunity rather than the culture problem.
Let me give you a case study, because this is a company that I've worked very closely with for a few years. Started right before the pandemic, had a product during the pandemic, and from an early point, very young, relatively young founders. Okay, so we're talking early 30s. And they said, Steve, we want to be the best company in the world to work for remotely. I was like, oh, okay, great. How will you know if you've achieved that goal? Like, what's happening? Complete deer in the headlights. Like, what? Like, yeah. So if you want to be the best company in the world to work for remotely, like, what's happening? How will you know that you've realized that outcome? Don't know. Didn't have an answer for that. Like, so let me ask you a different question. Are you setting that as an objective because you believe that will make you more attractive to hard to hire candidates, that you are fully in on working remotely? Yeah. I was like, okay, well, that's a thesis you have. You don't know that that's true, number one. And they are Canadian-based company, okay? And so they wanted to attract some, Silicon Valley talent and some talent maybe from Shoreditch and UK and other sort of Berlin, other big tech centers around the world. I said, okay, well, let's give that some thought. I mean, that's a great aspiration that you want, but you've never seen it work. You don't know how it could work. It's a big gamble, and you're building a new company. We're going through puberty, and this is a big experiment. So here we are 3 years later, and guess what's happening? You need to have centers of excellence. We all need to be together. It's not working. Communication's poor, and so it was a great aspiration. I don't know. I kept pressing them like, hey, you say you want to be the greatest company to work for remotely. Like, how's it going? What's happening? And they had very junior leaders that they hired. They didn't invest a lot in communication and understanding the value of that. And so it was an interesting thought experiment, but it never actualized. And now the business is struggling,
Okay. Yeah. So the hybrid that you say is undefined. One of the propositions, during the pandemic is we do need to come together because there is something magical about humans in a room with a whiteboard or coffee. But we don't necessarily need to do it 9 to 5. We these centers of excellence is, we have learning events or strategy events or execution sprints or, where we bring people together in virtual, and less sort of linked to the factory schedule that was a 1900s mindset that, you clock in and you clock out, right? So there has to be, I imagine, there is an optimal middle ground depending on what the company wants to achieve, to your point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the meta question for any organization is, what is the best arrangement for us to create the greatest long-term value? That's it.
Yeah.
How do we create value, right? Well, part of that is having great people. And a lot of people are demanding a lot more, independence in terms of where they work and how they work. I said, so, it's really a matter of what product space you're in, what the comfort level is for your leaders with a more remote team. I mean, we've been doing remote forever. It's called a sales force. Okay. All the salespeople have always been working remotely. And guess what? They're pretty important. They're bringing in, the revenue. So we know we can do it, but it's just, maybe we're not comfortable having the product and the engineering sitting in different places in different time zone. I don't know. And by the way, 9 to 5, that's fine if everyone's in the same postal code, right? Or the same time zone.
Yes.
9 to 5 doesn't mean the same thing if you've got a team in Bangalore and a team in, New York or, Australia and so forth. So it's worth experimenting to see. Like when I would be asked constantly during the post-pandemic era of what are we going to do here? Should we be hybrid, in-person, remote? My answer was always yes. They're like, no. Which one of those? I'm like, yes. Like, what do you mean? I said, you're going to have to experiment. You don't know. Is it, do they like it? Do you like it? Do the young people who just spent all this time in college, they don't want to be working at home. They want to be building a social, network of mentors and coaches, so it's not for everyone. And that's why what I like about this moment is forcing us to see one size fits all talent strategy just doesn't work today. It doesn't. And guess what? It's harder to lead in this domain. It is. Boo hoo. I'm so sorry for you that this is harder for you,
Oh, yeah. There are so many variables. Talking about variables, if you are going to experiment, there has to be a sandbox within to experiment. You understand what I mean by a sandbox? I think it's an American expression, right? You put your kid in the sandbox and they can do anything they want in the sandbox, but there are boundaries. Don't step outside of that. So an experiment can't be just let's throw mud at the wall. There has to be some kind of direction so that you know what the variables of the experiment are so that you can measure its outcome. Correct?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen a few companies try that, like let's try this day of the week. But here's a really cool question that this whole moment I think is surfaced for us. What is the reason that we should be meeting together? Like, what do we achieve better in person together? And what do we achieve better solo, independently, autonomously? That's a really healthy question that listen, you and I probably spent majority of our working life sitting in an office with an organization. And I would have to say 60, 70% of the time I'm sitting looking at a computer with nobody around. Yeah. Okay. But I was there, I was available. I could be interrupted. I could go find someone. Right. And I could problem solve and troubleshoot pretty quickly. This is a really great question that we never asked because we were never in that position at scale like we were during the pandemic. What is the point of being in a room together with other people? Why should I be in an office? And what can be done better there and what can be done better at home? I don't know that we've got all the answers to that yet. I don't know. What do you see?
I don't think people ask the right questions. You're absolutely right. And, you and I, as I guess with consultants' brains and aware of bias is like, we get to go in with a tabula rasa and go, yeah, well, what are you thinking? And that does frustrate people because they've got themselves stuck on some train tracks and going in a particular direction. Mm-hmm. And we're going, well, what if you want to go over here? So I guess where I was just wanting to to pin you down a little bit is, okay, if you're going to design the experiment, what are some of the things that you have to think about in advance rather than go, okay, well, let's try this and see what happens, because you won't know whether it's been a success or not unless you set the, I mean, you're an HR person originally, right? So, HR does, premise is people do what's measured, right? So you have to decide on the measures in advance. You can't have a performance review and say, well, I think you sucked. And you go, well, hang on a moment, but you didn't tell me what you were going to measure me on in advance. So therefore I couldn't, I did some great stuff, but I didn't do it according to your criteria. So do you understand where I'm going, or am I stuck on a train track? Am I missing?
No, I think that's a great question that, the manager, the employee, the team should be answering collectively. How are we going to know if this works? What does success look like? What's the reasonable time frame for us to assess this, right? If you're assessing work from home during the summer months and you've got people who have children, it's going to be different than assessing it in a school year when they're not home and they're in school. It's a different dynamic, right? And so, but I do agree with you. If you're going to do an experiment, come up with the parameters that seem reasonable for you, and it's kind of a negotiation, what that looks like. I haven't been around many organizations that have actually done that thoughtful experiment. Like, let's write it down, let's do it. But that, I think, is really good guidance on your part, Andrew, for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, it's about intentionality, but as we know, people are uncomfortable with uncertainty. You made that point early in our conversation. People go, I don't know what that's like, but I do know what this is like, so I'd rather go with the familiar. Mm-hmm. So let's introduce the elephant in the room, which got us together, which is working with AI agents. You talked about a nice juxtaposition between Klarna that went all in, boots first, let's get the bots to do everything, who then had to backpedal after their customer satisfactions plummeted. And the CEO himself admitted this was a mistake, and turned around and started quietly hiring back customer agents, versus Moderna, who had done something remarkable, which is to merge the CTO with the chief people officer, which is unheard of and potentially unique, because there's not many HR people that have the tech skills or tech people that have the HR skills. But the premise that transformation will require both technology and people development simultaneously, so they need to be at least talking. So those were the two sort of, I would say, boundary examples to say there's a discussion in the middle here. If we go too far with AI, we're going to have a problem. If we don't do enough, we're going to have a problem. Where is the experiment around the collaboration between AI and humans? And how do we lead that? As you say, boo-hoo, it's harder to lead, but now we need to lead that. So what are your thoughts about that space in between those two boundaries of Klarna and Moderna?
It's so interesting, the flow of this conversation, because just as we're talking about some of these impossibly new challenges leaders are having to confront around employees saying, I'm more productive at home than I am there. And like managers never having to have those conversations. And now we layer in AI. And I think, just at a meta level, and then we can get into some more specifics, because I know this is an area we mutually have a lot of interest and thoughts around. I think the biggest trap that we're falling into with AI makes sense. It makes a lot of sense because it's how we've perceived prior technology implementations, which is technology generally has delivered three things for us: do more, do it faster, do it cheaper. Okay. Can AI deliver that? Yes, it can. Is that the best value that we can derive from it? I don't think so. I think it's about 1% to 5% of what we can get from AI. I think rethinking how we solve problems, rethinking how we can create value is the ultimate opportunity that we have. But as you see, you cannot open a web browser with any kind of news feed without seeing job elimination, productivity, blah, blah, blah. And that's how we've seen software come in, do more, do it faster, do it cheaper, and get rid of, let's lower the costs. And human beings are 95% of most organizations' operating expense, people, payroll. And so I don't begrudge anyone for saying, hey, let's see if we can do that. But I think we're really missing an opportunity to rethink how we create value with artificial intelligence, because it can be, can really, I think, allow you to enter new markets. I mean, wouldn't you rather grow your top line than spend all your time trying to cut the bottom line? I mean, isn't that the excitement? So why are we all focused on the bottom line? Because that's how we've used technology mostly in the past, right? And so that's what I see. We're just sort of like running forward with this whole paradigm of how we used tech before. And we've got something, I mean, to call AI technology is kind of like misrepresenting or undercalling what really massive, we don't even know what the potential is. Meanwhile, everyone who's producing AI, researching it way on the front lines is as terrified about it as they are excited by it. Even Sam Altman, who releases OpenAI, ChatGPT, runs to Washington the next day and says, hey, you guys need to put some barriers in place because, this is pretty dangerous stuff we've just unleashed to the world. And I'm like, well, maybe you should do some time in prison for, being so irresponsible. Just throw that out there. But that's another story. So we've got, everyone feels behind, by the way, with AI. It showed up yesterday. We all feel behind. I'm like, why are we feeling behind? Like, why? Because I'm worried my competitor is going to figure something out before I do, right? That's why I need to get fast. I'm reading about this stuff just like you. I'm reading 2 to 3 hours a day about AI, and I feel like I know about this much, which is like a thimbleful of what it is. And it just keeps changing and keeps iterating. And now what I'm excited to see, and Apple seems to be quietly, yet in classic Apple form, powerfully saying, yeah, all these claims you have about like intelligence, they're really a lot less intelligent than you think they can be. And it's what I love about this moment. It's forcing us to really see, what are we humans really capable of doing? And what are the rote tasks? What are the other, operational features that artificial intelligence can take off our plate to really unleash the power that we have with, our human skills of empathy, communication, connecting the dots and understanding context. And that's a beautiful thing. But that's my biggest fear, is that we're using an old paradigm and running full speed ahead, not appreciating the opportunity.
No, you're spot on, which is why I'm combining AI with human potential in this book, because we've never really quantified potential in any way, shape, or form. And yet it is the very thing that makes us human: potential to grow and learn and love and laugh and grieve. And these are things that AI cannot do. And I think a lot of people forget that AI is a mirror. It's learned from us. That's the terrifying thing about AI, is it, it could calculate better ways to magnify the bad aspects of humanity, but also it can, solve some of the bigger things. It does just challenge the paradigm that we have of, you have to work 40 hours to get a wage, to pay a mortgage. And, it's a bit like, if we came up with a universal, free, sustainable energy source tomorrow, the oil companies would try and kill it because their business model would go out the window. And it's a little bit like that with AI, in the sense that, people are going to try and limit the things that it can do. And it's because we don't have a mechanism to have a conversation about what it means to be human, and what are our moral codes, etc. So there is a big picture problem that we have, and companies are left to make these decisions, and they are beholden to their shareholders and their quarterly reviews. And so they're not necessarily thinking the philosophical questions.
Right. It's interesting. You and I are looking at a very, very similar perspective on this one. I'm in the middle of a book. You're in the middle of a book. And my lens right now is focused on, because there's increasingly shortage supply of qualified talent, because people are changing careers and changing jobs, and the migration of talent around the world has been severely disrupted because of the pandemic. People are seeing their, I don't know if I want to go work in that country or this country. Like, so many things are tipping that. It started to get me thinking, like, most people I talk to, leaders, think we have a recruiting problem right now. And I'm saying, no, we don't. We have a skill awareness problem tied to potential, tied to understanding, raw talent over experience. Okay. And where I'm going with this is to try to solve this fear. Like, we can't find qualified people. I'm like, well, let me tell you something. If you ask any executive what the most impactful moment was in their career arc, I guarantee you they're going to tell you, I had this boss. They put me in this job I didn't think I was ready for. I didn't think I was qualified for. And I was scared. And it was the greatest experience of my life. Tackling something new I didn't have experience. I didn't think I was prepared for, experienced in, particularly women, by the way, who are like, oh, I'm not ready for that. I need more experience. And it just blew their mind and it completely raised their confidence level of what's possible. Okay. And so here's an interesting statistic. The geography of the world that has the highest turnover on the planet is Silicon Valley. The length of time people stay in a company is shorter there in that space than anywhere else in the world. Isn't it interesting that some of the most creative, innovative, most valuable companies in the world are there, where more people are doing something they've never done before in their life at scale? And look what's happening. But that's how we've designed work to prevent that from happening by and large. Like, no. You need to stay in your job. No. You need to stay at your desk because I know that's the way that's going to deliver predictable, reliable outcomes for me because that's what I've known in the past. And that's like, we're missing something amazing here. And I'm not trying to sell Silicon Valley because there's a whole lot wrong here, in addition to so many brilliant things. But you can't ignore the fact that when you put someone in a position of doing something they've never done before, you're unlocking magic, you're unlocking energy, you're like firing, and all the brain science is showing us, give people something new, give them, that's why all these, portfolio careers that people are having of doing different things, people are loving it. Why? Because they're experimenting with different stuff. It's not rote, boring, the same. We're not like putting people on a career death march anymore. So I'm trying to present a way that gets what you're talking about from a little bit of a different angle. Like, hey, we need to stop being worried about this and start saying, how can I deliver value and find that middle ground of, you're delivering some value to me with your experience, but I'm also giving you some new challenges that meeting your needs and meeting my needs, and raising the tide. But it's a nice, really fascinating moment.
It is. I've got a nice case study of a friend of mine, Annalise Olson, who runs HP's, or is the head of HP's printing. And her and her team put the printer into the space station. But early in her career, she was sent to China and never been to Asia, and new leader. And suddenly there's a legal problem because they used a third party power cable and something went wrong with it. And then, she's running defense and having to get ahead of the problem. And, she speaks about that catapulted her up through the leadership of HP because she stepped up to the plate. It's a great study. Here I am writing my fifth book on leadership. I started my career as a physiotherapist, and I have a postgraduate in traditional Chinese medicine and a master practitioner of hypnosis. And people go, and people love that it's an eclectic background. And they, sometimes like, how do you join the dots? And I say, actually, curiosity and observation. As a physiotherapist, it trained me in observational skills. I walk into an environment and I just see stuff that other people don't see because that was my training as a physiotherapist. I had to be able to see somebody walk across a room and be able to tell if the limp was due to their big toe, their ankle, their knee, their hip, or their back. And that's a skill that I use to this day when I walk in with a leadership team and I just look around and I go, oh yeah. And to your point, you get to see those assumptions and those mindsets. So it is a brilliant time, which leads us to the HR conundrum. How do I hire for this talent? Because your classic STAR interview process, situation, task, action, result, is a tad pointless because the situation you want them to work in doesn't yet exist. So the T in the STAR has to be, give me a situation, tell me what you were thinking, and we need to be able to analyze their ability to process the variabilities and the uncertainties. What do you think about that hypothesis?
I think along the lines of what you're talking about, that we have inherited a recruiting practice of hiring for what we needed yesterday and not what we need tomorrow. We're hiring for experience, not potential, not talent. And I believe that's a real miss. Having seen so many job descriptions that were mimeographed, if people remember what a mimeograph is, mimeographed, then Xeroxed, These
mimeographs predate faxes, right?
Yeah. Like these old crusty, like, you want me to go hire this? This is just like the worst written job description. That's what AI can really help with. Like, make this thing sexy, like bang. But listen, I believe, if you believe like I do, jobs are changing faster, markets are changing faster. The need for new skills has never been greater. I need people to learn new stuff quickly. I need to hire for learning velocity. I need to know, Andrew, that you can learn stuff quickly and you're a self-study. You got the growth mindset. You're a curious person. And I need to know that when the job changes, you're changing, and you're changing the job. And so that means, I think we're in our lifetime, and maybe the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see this. We're going to see more people hired on what they can learn than on what they know. I need to know that you can grow and develop and learn new things and open new perspectives for us. I don't need you to keep doing the same thing you've been doing all the time. I know that. And so that's a big switch. And so then it gets to, well, how do I know you've got high learning velocity? What are the clues, And I think we're going to see more CVs, LinkedIn profiles, and so forth really showcase me having clues that when this technology came out, like you were using it like around the same time it came out, like I could see you're an early adopter, that you love it and you're hungry and you're a self-teacher, right? And those are some things, just like you're probably going to have chapters in your book around, how do I know potential? Like, what does it look like? Like, let's say, like, the one word I hate as a recruiter is passion. Like, what the fuck is that? Passion. I've been so snookered by someone's passionate about something. Like, that's like, you got charisma. Great. Can you sell? No, but everyone loves you, but no, you can't do your job, And so we got to be really thoughtful around how we think about this,
Yeah, I included, there's a couple of good commencement speeches, university commencement speeches from some people that said, everybody's going to tell you to follow their passion, but that guy made his money in coal smelting, So,
right.
people who tell you to follow their passion are already successful,
right?
And you're a university.
That's the NYU guy. Yeah. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
And there's also a great comedian out of Australia who does a wonderful commencement speech.
Oh, I've seen that twice, and I can't listen to it enough. It is wonderful, magic. Yeah.
It is. So I've got both of those in because you have to touch on it because everybody talks about it. So I had to say, well, here's what they say about passion. But it was Ken Robinson who did his TED talks about passion being a driver. So you need drive, and psychologically that's well and truly proven. So the drive and the learning, and I think maybe we need to frame passion as drive, but drive towards a destination. No, I'm passionate about origami. Well, that's great. But, if we look at your ikigai, does the world need origami right now? And will anybody pay you for origami is the key problem, right?
Right.
So cool.
Right.
All right. So look, I've used a bit of your time. There's a question I like to ask, and that is, you've been interviewed before, I've been interviewed before, and you get to the end of the interview and it was a lot of fun, but you kind of come away from the interview and go, but they didn't ask me this. So what is the question I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
I guess, what are people getting wrong in thinking about the future of work? What are some of the big mistakes that you see that people are making? I mean, there's just so many. This domain is so huge. We could go lots of different places, but that's the one, I guess, that comes to mind because it's sort of a practically focused kind of question.
So what are the top 3 things people get wrong?
I'm so glad you asked the question. That's a brilliant question, Andrew. Yeah. I think, let's just take AI. What I think we're getting wrong about AI is that this is more of a cultural challenge than a technical challenge. This is more about us having to confront our own insecurities. Like if someone says, hey, Steve, go see what you can do with AI. I'm like, why would I do that? It's going to make me less valuable. Like, why would I do that? Remember the whole let's outsource to India initiative for a lot of, Western, let's go there. It's cheaper. Why would I do that? It's just you're going to move my work there and I'm not going to have it. Like, what, do I have to gain by moving my job to India? Zero, right? So I'm going to passively resist and deny. And I think that is the big challenge. We have to just be open with ourselves that this moment of AI is a threat to a lot of people on a real visceral level. And let's have those conversations and start trying to frame them from how can we make your life more amazing, your career more beautiful, your successes more dynamic with AI? Not how do we squeeze you for more widgets, not how do we grind you to the bone with AI. This is a big cultural, real philosophical, moment for us. And I think we're missing it. We're just running ahead, go faster, do more. Like that's a miss, I think. And that's what I think it's the conversation we need to have more. And it's uncomfortable.
True. Okay, that's number one. What's number two?
Okay, number two. Let me switch gears here. I think that, as I said, I was hinting at it a little bit earlier in our conversation. We have to fundamentally, I think, recognize the model work is broken, and we need a new architecture for work that celebrates success from fluidity. Success from fluidity. Like I have increasingly, I'm finding more and more companies that are realizing we can create real creative and innovative value, even if people don't stay a long time. And I find very few people philosophically disagree with my points, leaders in big companies, let's just say. Very few people will disagree with them, but even fewer people will start acting saying, we need to build a new architecture. Let's do it. Like the Modernas, like what? I don't know that Moderna's decision is a great decision. I don't know. It's too early. I'm curious as hell. I want to watch it like crazy. It's a great experiment. Bold, really bold. Like IT and HR, are you kidding me? Those departments could be more radically different. Let's see how it goes. But it's an appreciation that AI is touching this world of work in ways it's never done before. Maybe our org design needs to be different. And I love that. I love that they're bold enough to try that.
No, I think that's brilliant. And I did say three, so I'll stay consistent. Is there a third? Third thing that people get wrong.
Oh, third thing that people get wrong. I think, okay, I'm sort of regurgitating stuff we talked about a little bit earlier. I think it is believing that playing defense is the right way right now versus like rebuilding something new, call it 2A.
I'm fine with that. There's been some quotable quotes and some real gold in this conversation.
Hopefully we'll see more. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on Self-Leadership to Potentialize with Andrew Bryant. If you're ready to be the driver of your life and not the passenger, keep exploring with us. Get your copy of Potentialize wherever good books are sold. For more resources or to book Andrew for coaching and speaking engagements, visit selfleadership.com. Until next time, think smart, lead better, and always potentialize your future.